Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the award-winning Great Indoors is proud to come to the fabulous Las Vegas Convention Center, MWC 2022. Baby, let's make it amazing.
Thank you, Frank. Yes, this is season 5 of TGI, and here in fabulous Las Vegas as the GSMA's official podcast, I've been joined by a multitude of guests from across the industry, and always I'm joined by my producer and co-pilot, Larissa Yee. This is the 6th episode of the incredible conversations that we captured here at MWC 2022 Las Vegas, North America's biggest telecoms and technology show. And in this particular episode, I've been speaking with Matt Hatton, who is the founding partner of Transforma Insights. We've also been talking with Rick Somerton, who's the president and CEO at eSAT Global. Now, unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of months, two of the biggest technologies that have featured in recent announcements from handset manufacturers and service providers have been eSIM and satellite. Now, what does this mean? What is it all about? And are satellite and eSIM technologies the next frontiers beyond 5G? So buckle up and let's get started. Okay, so my next guest here on the Great Indoors at MWC 2022 in Las Vegas is Rick Somerton. Rick is the CEO of eSAT Global, and he's come all the way from Australia just to meet us here on the Great Indoors.
Absolutely, Matthew. It's worthwhile.
So really nice to meet you, Rick. And I think what we're going to be talking about in this particular session is satellite, right? Which has taken a lot of attention in the press. It's captured people's imagination. So if you will, Rick, just give us maybe a quick introduction on yourself, your role, and on eSAT Global and what you guys are doing.
Sure. Well, I'm actually formerly a banker.
Okay.
I used to work for some Wall Street investment banks.
Right.
I left them about 20 years ago and got into some businesses myself. And for my sins, I got involved in IoT about 5 or 6 years ago. And 3 years ago, eSAT reached out to me and asked me if I'd help them in their business. So eSAT's business is about providing IoT connectivity to users in remote areas,
right,
using existing GeoSat satellites, which is a little bit about against the conventional wisdom, which has always been that the geos wouldn't be able to close the link for IoT,
right,
and so we're unsuitable. But we've developed some technologies that not only disprove that conventional wisdom, but in fact demonstrate that we can deliver IoT for a significantly lower cost, 1% of the cost of LEOs,
wow,
and more reliably, and we'll have full global coverage when we switch on at the end of next year.
Wow, excellent. And give us an example of what one of those IoT use cases may be in a remote area.
Well, one of our really important use cases is in relation to livestock tracking.
Right.
So when I talk to my friends and other people about tracking assets from satellites, they go, "Oh, you could track containers."
Right.
And I say, "How many containers are there?" No one knows, but it's about 20 to 30 million containers.
Right.
There's 3 billion head of livestock in the world.
Right.
And with the technology that we're developing, we can get information from cow tags that tells you where they are. You can geo-fence the cows.
Wow.
You can actually report on their health. So we can understand if they're in heat, whether they're calving, whether they're pregnant, and all those pieces of information are really important, especially in calving. 7% of stock is lost every year in calving.
Right, wow.
And so we think we can significantly reduce that as a very strong business case for implementing this on every cow in Australia.
Right.
And so the number of devices that we can get out there, we think that we can capture 600 million of those 3 billion devices, or 3 billion head of livestock, which would make it one of the biggest use cases of IoT in the world.
Yeah. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So you're tracking the livestock. You can do that in any country, and you're selling that solution to the government entities or to the farmers directly?
To the ranchers.
Right.
And in Australia, we have actually the support of Meat and Livestock Australia,
Right.
which is the peak body for the livestock industry. They act as an R&D funding arm of the federal government in Australia.
Yeah.
And so they're actually providing funding to help us develop our chipset that will go into these cow tags.
Wow, that's really, really incredible.
Yes.
And look, satellite as a whole has captured like I said in the intro, the imagination of the industry, and there's been several announcements recently from Apple and T-Mobile. But what excites you about this particular area of comms, and where do you think things are heading with the IoT component and beyond?
Well, the IoT is an important part for us, but the other thing is in text. We think that text has the ability to deliver communications to people that are unserviced at the moment, and without the same system that we have in place for IoT, we can send small messages, and so it's eminently suitable to sending text messages. And everyone's really excited about having connectivity for calls, and they're direct to phone calls. We think that that's really a fool's errand, because the industry or the demand for calls is in decline.
Yes.
And I look around here and I see people with their phones out. They're not on the phone. They're texting. They're sending texts, and so text is the dominant form of communications on cell phones. And in remote areas, why do you need to invest huge amounts of dollars to service a market that's in decline and can be adequately serviced by texting?
Yeah.
So right now we're in the process of developing a system that will go well beyond anything that Apple's proposing at the moment, which is about purely emergency services. We've already got the infrastructure available to us to do that emergency services. But add on to that the ability of governments to be able to broadcast in disaster scenarios. Right now in Florida, there'll be people that have no cell phone connectivity because all the towers have been knocked down, the electricity's out. But the government, using satellites with an eSAT enabled phone or an eSAT enabled hub, would be able to receive emergency messages. So where to go for help. So where all the shelters are, etc. So all of that information is important information. The other part of that is that we can then work with the first responders and provide connectivity for first responders. We're also looking at an application where someone that's in need of rescue will be routed directly through to the first responders.
Wow.
And so that's going to save a lot of lives. In fact, I just came from a session earlier today where Globalstar was talking about they have 250,000 Spot X devices, which are basically simple text messaging systems, and with location on, and they say that they save 1.6 lives a day with those 250,000 devices.
Really?
Now imagine how many lives we can save if we can enable every phone to have that emergency connectivity. And the cost is the really important thing. So we can do it for $1 a year maybe. We're looking at volumes that have never been seen before in satellite markets. Now, in the IoT market, there's 4 million devices connected. I talked about one use case where we think we can get 600 million. So that changes the economics of satellite. So
Absolutely.
when you were able to divide those fixed costs by such large numbers, the average cost comes down.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, great examples of, again, harnessing technology for good. Right, that's an underlying theme that I'm seeing, and I think we're not just looking at the functions and the features and the dollars and the cents, but the leading part of any story from anybody I've spoken to here is what good it's going to do for society, right? And I think in your first use case with the livestock, we're part of an initiative in Snohomish County called the Food Resiliency Program. So using technology to improve the yields of the farmers that produce apples in these orchards. But again, combined with this kind of innovation, like you said, the amount of livestock that can be saved and how that then translates back into the supply chain is incredible, right?
Absolutely.
It's really incredible. It's
Well,
fascinating.
If you think about it, there's out of if 7% die every year just from childbirth, that's 200 million head of cattle or livestock.
Yeah. And do you operate in other countries as well?
Yeah, well, this is going to be right across the world.
Oh, right, okay.
And one of the great things about what we're doing is that we can't deliver and service every country. So what we'll do is we're building a module that will just be plug and play. So anyone in any country will be able to take our module, put it into a device. It could be a soil sensor, it could be other agricultural, weather reporting, rain gauges, a whole range of agricultural stuff, things in the mining industry as well. And they can take that module and incorporate it into their devices and simply plug and play. So they can connect, and we'll sell them connectivity and we'll sell them the device.
Wow. And all those devices they're available now, or are they in
right now we're in development. We've been through some testing, and we've actually proven that we can close the link across the satellites. We did that a couple of years ago.
Right. And
right now we're in development, chipset development, and when we get all that done, by the end of next year, we'll be entering into the market.
Wow, it's really fascinating. It's incredible. And on that topic and other topics at this show, what have you seen so far that you found interesting this year in Las Vegas?
Oh, good question. I think it's the enthusiasm that I see from everyone here. They're all excited about, as you say,
back together.
Being back together. That's great. But delivering those benefits to people. So they all see the mission of improving people's lives. And everyone's signed up to that.
Exactly. Because it did. I just get this sense, everybody I speak to, like I said, they're focused on that positive outcome now that's benefiting humanity. And I think given everybody was in that situation with COVID and technology helped us get us through it, what are the other challenges we face now that technology can help fix? Whether it's climate change, we spoke to somebody who had the ambient IoT tags that can help towards that, the food crisis that we have, and your solution there, Rick, helps towards bettering that. Everything has a positive knock-on to society, and I think that to me gives me, like you said, great enthusiasm, and it makes it fascinating being here this week.
Well, I've really enjoyed that positivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how we finish, I've really enjoyed meeting you, Rick, and enjoyed our conversation so far. But I finish with something called TGI to go. TGI to go. So it's a quick fire round, multiple choice questions. You just give your preference.
Okay.
And we pretty much ask the guests all the same questions, and then at the end we'll have an interesting montage of different perspectives.
Okay.
So it's just the fun bit we add at the end.
It's just A, B, C, or D?
It's just one or the other. So the first question, for example, is Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin?
Frank.
Okay. He'll be here at 3, by the way. You have to come out.
I heard him
you
yesterday.
saw him yesterday? Yeah, I remember you came. Yeah. What did you think?
Oh, it was fun.
Yeah. Blackjack or roulette?
Blackjack.
Yeah. And have you had time to enjoy any blackjack?
Not really a gambler. I gamble enough in my own life with my business. There's enough invested there, enough risk.
New York or Los Angeles?
Oh, definitely New York.
Yeah.
No question.
It's a great city. It's
a
great city. But you like Las Vegas, right?
I love it. Yeah.
And how often do you come to Vegas?
Oh, this is only my second trip.
Oh, right.
Last time was CES in about 2001.
Oh, right. Wow.
Yeah.
And where are you staying? Are you staying anywhere?
At MGM Grand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's okay. Right.
Yeah. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Yeah. And the final one, we're getting lots of different answers here. Singing or dancing?
Oh, I dance and sing at the same time, so there you go.
Well, we'll see you out there with Frank at 3 o'clock, Rick.
Oh, okay.
Well, listen, it's a pleasure having you on The Great Indoors. Pleasure meeting you and learning about what you're doing. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to just leave our listeners with, or where they can find out more information about yourself and eSAT?
Oh, sure. Well, you can find us on esatglobal.com.
Right,
Very
okay.
simple.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
love to hear from anyone.
Okay, excellent. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rick. It's been
Okay.
brilliant. So I hope you're enjoying the show so far, and thank you for taking time to join us today. We'll get into what you specifically specialise in, Matt, at Transforma in a moment. But just on a personal level, what's the biggest innovation that has touched or impacted you personally over the last 12 months?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. Really, it's to do with being able to get back and see people face to face, and specifically technology-wise. When I went on my business travels, I used to have to collect a whole load of receipts and take them home and scan them and send them to our accounts team and what have you. And now, with the wonders of some of the apps and the fintech space being in a quite a sophisticated place at the moment, I'm now able to just take a picture of my receipts, automatically upload them. They analyze the receipts and automatically send it off to our accounts team, and it all works like clockwork. So personally for me is the big thing.
Yeah, well, particularly when you're here in Las Vegas and it's pretty expensive.
Yeah, it is.
You got to get those receipts in.
Receipts galore. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a mundane one, but sometimes, well, where there's muck, there's brass, is what they say. Where I come from, and in the mundane applications is where the really interesting stuff happens, I think.
Cool. So give us a bit of background on yourself, Matt, and what you're looking at in the market right now. I know we're going to talk specifically about eSIM related things, but just for our listeners, an overview of what you're typically looking at in the market and publishing.
Yeah, happy to do that. So I'm one of the founders of Transforma Insights. We're a research consulting firm focused predominantly, I'd say, on the IoT space, but we cover a lot of other disruptive technology areas, and we work in a couple of ways. We've got a advisory service where we're helping enterprises and technology vendors on technical and commercial best practice, and then we do a lot of work on sort of client-specific stuff, maybe marketing promotion, white papers, webinars, that kind of stuff as well. But essentially, we're the IoT guys is more or less how we position ourselves.
Okay, let's go to the first real question that we wanted to address. You had to be living under a rock if you didn't notice the Apple iPhone 14 launch last week. The big significant thing, a lot of people within Amdocs got excited, was the eSIM component. What is the significance of that from your perspective, Matt, in the industry as a whole?
It's potentially incredibly impactful in terms of how the mobile industry works. We've been looking at eSIM for quite a few years because actually the IoT space has been one of the earliest adopters. They want these chips because they're much more robust and they're more capable of dealing with vibration and high temperatures and low temperatures and that kind of thing. So we've been focused on this eSIM space for a long time, and the IoT space loves eSIM because it means you don't have to switch in and out plastic SIMs and so on. But when it comes to the consumer space, this is relatively new. Now, we've had eSIMs in devices for quite a while, and in fact there was 2019 there was a Motorola device which was eSIM only, but really it's Apple that moves the market, not so much Motorola in terms of phones. But the interesting thing here is not so much the form factor, the fact that you're switching in, you don't have to switch in and out plastic SIM and so on, but it's more to do with how the relationship might change between the user and the mobile network. Yeah, exactly, and how they select their network operator, and the fact that they'll be able to chop and change almost at will if they want to. But the big question mark is still, will they want to? And I think about, okay, my contract cost me, okay, I'm going to be put it in UK terms, it's about £15 a month, which in today's exchange rate is about $15 a month. Not
as of 9 o'clock this morning.
Exactly, UK economy not in a good state at the moment. But for that I get like 120 gig of data. When am I going to want to switch to a different operator and incur additional charges? Well, when I'm roaming, yeah, potentially I might do that. At the end of contract, Might it mean that I change to having much shorter contracts? It might do, but if the operator is going to offer me something that's a long-term contract at a very low price, maybe it doesn't make that much difference. Essentially, what we've got is the mobile space and the buying of connectivity being brought into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Because, I was in Berlin last week. I go on the tube there, I can buy, or the metro there rather,
Yeah.
I can buy my tickets online, I can travel there. And it's kind of crazy that pretty much the only thing you can't buy on your smartphone is the connectivity for your smartphone.
The reason why it's in your hand.
Yes, exactly. And we're now with eSIM, you get into a situation where you can make that acquisition through the natural medium. How it changes things, well, we just don't know in the consumer space. We can hypothesize that some of the commercial terms from the operators might well change. I think it makes roaming an awful lot easier. I think for me that's the number one use case is when I go overseas, I can localize onto a local network
at your choice.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm then not limited to what the roaming rates I might be paying from the operator are. But then you can counter all these things with commercial terms. Then the operators might decide, you know what, we're going to adapt our roaming tariffs accordingly to make sure that actually you don't need to move to a roaming provider. So there's all these kinds of dynamics. What it mostly does is make things an awful lot easier for the consumer. Yeah, exactly. And there's also a potential change from who might be your provider. Will Apple decide that actually they're going to become your connectivity provider and they'll decide which network you connect over? There hasn't been a lot of an indication that they want to do that, but it's something they could potentially do. The connectivity relationship switches to being one with your handset rather than necessarily one with your operator.
That's really fascinating, and also it opens up the door in that scenario where Apple would be negotiating the pricing package on behalf of the consumer.
Yeah.
Whoa.
The question is, can they be bothered to do that?
Exactly.
Is it a part of their business? Is it something that they see as having sufficient margin to be worth doing? Is it too painful an exercise to go through? That's a call for Apple, but it's certainly something they could do.
Let's use another scenario, because the United Kingdom, like the United States, is a highly competitive market. The big operators fight for customers. If you look at T-Mobile here with their own carrier, they were the first to do unlimited data plans. They disrupted the market, and they're doing fantastically well. Where I live in Canada is a very benign competitive environment. It's almost an oligopoly. High prices, the highest prices in the G8 are in Canada. I know Trudeau's trying to inject competition into the market, but the big three, TELUS, Bell and Rogers, it's almost, I've got to be careful because they're customers of ours, but the prices are set and there isn't a lot of competitive. Could this help in a market like Canada shake up the potential competitive aspects?
It should be able to, absolutely, because it would theoretically, well, more than theoretically, practically allow you to switch between operators much more easily, and so there's much more of an incentive for them to try to encourage you onto their network.
Even if they were just going to bring something down $1 and it's that easy to switch over, and then that can start
It can do. If you look at what T-Mobile's done here, they have launched an offer where you can try their 5G for free for, I think it's 6 months or something along those lines, and that kind of offer, come try us, come use our services. Now, ultimately, the price point of that connectivity does depend on those operators and maybe any MVNOs that they decide to have done deals with. So they have a lot of control over what ultimately that price is going to be. But they might find that if one operator moves, then the others will need to move. We'll have to see.
So here's another interesting point. Now, in my history, my background, I worked for many handset vendors, Nokia, Motorola, LG. And getting products listed with service providers was a very competitive gig. Unless you were iPhone, right? Which the service providers will automatically resist the introduction of eSIM, right? That's what you based on our discussion. So how do you think that's going to play out? Because I always remember, if I use an old example, when the handset manufacturers were rushing to put RCSE in the devices, right? That was a prerequisite to get your product listed, it had to have RCSE to fight against the OTT players where the service providers were getting no revenue at all. So that, and if you didn't have that in your device, you weren't getting listed, regardless of whether the consumer was going to use it or not.
Yeah.
In this instance, do you think the service providers could potentially say, we ain't going to list that device, Samsung, unless you take the eSIM capability out? Do they have that power still?
I don't think they do anymore, really. 15 years ago, we saw a big scramble. I was working at 3UK at the time when the iPhone was launched, and there was a big scramble by the operators because when the first iPhone launched, they decided to go exclusive with one operator, O2 in the UK, in the UK's example, and that was quite a coup for them, and they controlled a large proportion of the route to market for selling handsets, because that was typically how you bought your handset. You paid your £35 a month and you got your free handset, and you carried on paying like that. But over the course of the last 15 years, a lot more handset purchase has moved out of the operator channel. I don't know many people who get their handsets through the operator anymore. I certainly buy my iPhone separately from buying my connectivity, because then I can buy a SIM that costs me, like I say, £15 a month rather than something much more extortionate. So it's moved much more in the direction of the handsets being something that people buy separately, and therefore the operators don't really have that much of power or control over how the handsets might be set up. They can't dictate anymore. I don't think the features and functionality, other than obviously they certify devices, so you've got that aspect to it. But generally speaking, I think it'll be out of their hands.
So let's switch gears and talk about IoT in relation to eSIM. eSIM in general, regardless of the iPhone launch, propel IoT and where it's heading. Because I think it's fair to say it's still, in the last one I talked about the Gartner hype cycle, IoT is still somewhere, maybe not at the top of the hype cycle, you'll probably know better than me, Matt, but it still hasn't realised the hype that was behind it.
Depends who you are, right? If you're GM and every car that you manufacture is rolling off the production line with an embedded module, it's not hype. If you're a utility that's connected every smart meter in their territory, it's certainly not hype. What we've seen is perhaps not hitting the overinflated forecasts that have happened in the past. Now, speaking as someone who's done IoT forecasting for at least a dozen years, I have to say that we were rather more conservative than most, and we weren't too far out, like 20 to 25% out for what happened in 2020. So I think that's a pretty good win. In terms of driving IoT through eSIM, there's a couple of aspects to this. One of them is in certain markets you need your cellular connected IoT device to localize onto a local network. There are regulations in countries like Brazil and Turkey and various others. And having this eSIM capability streamlines that process of localizing. And in fact, more broadly, it streamlines the process of putting a device into market. So imagine you're a manufacturer of, I don't know, connected healthcare device of some sort. You don't want the logistics issue of every market it ends up in, you have to switch out SIMs in order to get it to work. The fact that it can arrive in a market and localize onto a network is a great thing. That kind of bootstrapping is an immediate win for eSIM. There is still a question mark about the extent to which enterprises will want to pick up a set of 1 million deployed smart meters, and say, I'm going to shift those over onto a different network, onto a different operator. You've got all the back-end integration issues to deal with, and the fact that actually maybe it doesn't work in the case of a few of the devices, and then you've got to do a truck roll, and you've got all these sorts of challenges associated with it, which mean that for the enterprise they may be a little hesitant on taking advantage of that capability, just to shave a few cents off the cost of their connectivity. But in terms of that initial localization, in terms of an insurance policy for in the event of that network being switched off. We're seeing quite a lot of 2G and 3G refarming happening and that kind of thing. And so for network longevity, very useful tool there, and kind of keeping your suppliers honest as well, right? You've got this threat. I can move. I can take my connectivity elsewhere. There's also been quite a significant issue with IoT devices roaming when they shouldn't really be roaming, because roaming was designed for I come to Vegas for a week. I can use my phone that I bring from home, and then I go back home. Right? It wasn't designed for IoT devices that go into the US from wherever and are connecting to those US networks in perpetuity. And the network operators in the US don't like it, and rightly so. That's not what it was designed for. And so having that capacity to switch across to the network operator of choice in the US absolutely makes sense. Now, to counter that, they could just be a bit more lenient on how they work with roaming, or introduce something that's rather more sophisticated in terms of how they roam, introducing approved lists of carriers and that kind of thing. So there are alternatives, but essentially it provides that capability to localize and just drive out some of that complexity of deploying global or multi-country IoT solutions.
Interesting. Now, keeping in the world of future gazing and maybe things that are a little bit hyped. Obviously, we can't go anywhere in the world right now where you don't hear the word metaverse.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I haven't had a chance to check out the K Metaverse booth that's in the exhibit
me
hall.
either. Back-to-back meetings for me all week.
I want to check it out, but how will IoT and eSIM benefit or help propel the metaverse, or whatever manifestation it actually finds itself to be in the end?
Yeah, the metaverse is a very interesting one, and I just want to, before I answer your question, I got a kind of thought on metaverse, which is very unusual in the telecoms space for there to be a market which is demand driven.
Yeah.
Right? We are used to having markets which are supply driven. You build the networks, you roll out the services, and then you hope that the customer
build it and they will come.
If you build it, they will come. Yeah. But the concept of the metaverse, with augmented reality and virtual reality, needing ultra low latency, everything being virtual, this kind of much more deep, engaged experience for users, is something that's been proposed without necessarily yet having the technology there to be able to deliver it. And I find that a fascinating dynamic in the telecom space. Now, the whole idea with 5G is that you get that ultra low latency, the high bandwidth, and therefore it's a great capability for delivering on the metaverse. Potentially, depends how it plays out. And you've got things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Obviously, if you're talking about that hugely immersive experience, then these kinds of what we can term IoT devices, according to our definition, that would be an IoT device. So we're and you've got that sort of overlap between 5G, hot topic, IoT, hot topic, metaverse. It's all kind of interlinked. In terms of eSIM, no specific implication I wouldn't have said. I'm being cautious here because there's probably something amazing that I'm instantly not thinking of. But other than it just simplifies the experience of connecting devices, which is, metaverse is going to be all about connected devices, and you may find that you may chop and change sessions based on what kind of capabilities you might need from a network, say. One of the things about 5G is you can do things with, say, network slicing, where you can have a slice which is ultra low latency or ultra high bandwidth or these kinds of various features. And you may find that someone wants to switch networks to connect to the network that's going to give them the most appropriate connectivity for their metaverse experience. Yes, I'm completely hypothesizing.
No, but it's a good hypothesis. Is there also a hardware element? Because when I've been looking at the metaverse and we look at the headsets and the power requirements, the heat, the cooling requirements, the need for miniaturization, does eSIM help play into that, particularly if those devices leave the house?
Yes. So what we've got is a definitional thing here. sometimes when we talk about eSIM, we're talking about actually the remote SIM provisioning functionality that allows you to actually switch between operators. What you're talking about there is the hardware aspect to it, which is at least equally important. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are device types where having that slimmed down component rather than having a dedicated housing with a plastic SIM, which is fairly bulky, makes a big difference. I mean, it made a big difference with smartwatches, say. That was probably the first consumer sector or consumer product where it was thought relevant to introduce eSIM. Now, obviously, that's not a metaverse piece of hardware, but anything you can do to drive out the costs, improve the battery life on these devices, make them a bit more smaller and sexier looking. And iSIM, actually, the next step on from eSIM, this is where you integrate the SIM functionality into another component on the device. Right. Helps even further with that, because then you don't need even a eSIM component. You've eliminated that altogether. So it's just another step. Ultimately, I think everything goes from eSIM. Well, first off, everything goes eSIM. There is no doubt that the plastic SIM is on life support, shall we say, and eSIM is going to dominate. And then beyond that, iSIM is going to be the next thing to come through. And we did some work that we published just earlier on this year, where we talked about the price of the lifetime connectivity for an IoT device, and it's just cheaper using eSIM and then cheaper using iSIM. Ultimately, once you take into account all of the various variables about supply chain costs and so on, it just works out cheaper. Plus, it's better for battery life, and better for slimming down the form factor as well.
Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, Matt. I've got more questions. We could probably talk a lot longer on the subject, but I think you've provided some fascinating insights so far.
Good.
So we're going to finish with our TGI to go quick fire round.
All right.
You ready for it?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
TGI to go.
Frank Sinatra or Dean Martin?
It's got to be Old Blue Eyes, isn't it? Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, you're in the majority there, and he'll be here at 3 o'clock. The wonder of technology.
Excellent.
Bringing him back. Poker or craps?
Poker.
Yeah. Are you planning to play any poker?
I am not, although I did get accused when I came through security that I might be a high roller bringing in lots of cash. They asked me that question. I was like, no, I'm here purely for work. So.
Rome or Nice?
Rome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been a bit of a history buff, and I think Rome is it's where more of that is to be found. Certainly. Yeah.
It's always a beautiful city.
The eternal city.
One for a fellow Brit: Indian or Chinese food?
Oh, Indian food, without a doubt.
Yeah.
I'm a dab hand at cooking it. Chinese food I've never been able to quite master, and actually probably if I'm going out to a restaurant, I'm more likely to be a Chinese restaurant, but if I'm cooking at home, which I do a lot, it'll be Indian.
Right. And have you got any plans to explore the culinary delights of Las Vegas?
Las Vegas, not so much. I'm heading out on Saturday morning. In fact, I'm driving over to San Francisco. I shall be going through Death Valley and doing the Sequoia National Park and a whole bunch of stuff there. Yeah, so that'll be fun. Culinary delights of Las Vegas. I tend to find that the good places are well off the strip, way off the strip. Places in little strip malls that are you wouldn't otherwise look at. That's where all the chefs who work on the strip eat. Go look for those restaurants. I can't remember the names of any off the top of my head, but there's some good ones.
Certainly be more cost effective because the restaurants.
It very definitely is. Yeah, for sure.
Singing or dancing?
Oh, singing. I'm a singer in a band, so I've got it. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What's the band called?
The band's called The Proposition.
All right.
So
is it available on?
No, absolutely not. It's
strictly
the occasional wedding, or I guess we do bar mitzvahs. This would be traditional, but no, it's named The Proposition because I worked at 3 UK. I worked in the proposition department.
Right. Okay.
It was formed by a bunch of us who worked there, and we've kind of carried it on. So yeah, that's us. Nothing very glamorous, more entertainment than art, shall we say? And I would describe my contribution as enthusiastic rather than necessarily talented.
Oh, brilliant! Well, you're welcome to join Frank Sinatra at 3 p.m. and we'd like to have you here, Matt, to do that. Brilliant. Well, that concludes our TGI to go, and that concludes our session today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Matt. Your insights have been fascinating. Where can people find out more about your research and what you're publishing?
Go check us out on transformainsights.com, particularly the blog. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's available for free on there, but yeah, go check the website.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
So what another great episode. I want to thank our guests, Matt and Rick. Great conversations. Stay tuned for more. There's more to come from this show from MWC 2022, and also check out www.amdocs.com/The Great Indoors for more information, back episodes, and videos associated with TGI. So I'm Matthew Roberts in Las Vegas for Amdocs. See you next time, wherever you are.